Welcome, everybody, to Gridiron Astrology Week 14. It's Gemini Jess here, spicy Gemini Jess, and Dorje Kirsten of Heart Astrology. And we are excited to present the game of the week, which is going to be the Indianapolis Colts, 8-4, versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, 8-4. Now, these two teams are like incredibly both of them are been on a real hot streak terror this season. The Jaguars have like kind of built their momentum. The Colts had it early on, and they're kind of like letting it slip. Now, before we start in, please give a big welcome to Jess. Hi, Jess. Good to see you.
Hi.
And then here's just some stats that I'm going to throw out there to give us a sense of how this game is and why it's a matchup between two powerhouse hitters. The Indianapolis Colts have been scoring 30 points per game on average. They are the first in the league, so they are a powerhouse offense. Then they're only allowing 20 points per game, which is why they are 8-4. Yards per rush are averaging 5 yards per rush. Yards per rushing allowed, only 4 yards. Yards per pass attempt, 8 yards. That's fourth in the NFL. And they're only allowing 6.5 yards per pass attempt. Their pressure rate on quarterback is 25% of the time, which is seventh in the NFL. So 25% of that time, that quarterback is having to get rid of the ball early. Turnover differential is +5. They're tied for number 7 in that realm. Defensive third down conversion rate, 43%. So on third down, they're making that next drive 43% of the time. They are a real powerhouse team. Red zone, once they're in the 20-yard line, they are going to score 65% of the time this season, which is really high. It's I think about sixth in the league right now, sixth
Wow.
highest in the league. However, they are going to stop the other team 54% of the time. So they're kind of an offensive juggernaut.
Yeah.
Their defense is, it's good. I would say it's top 12, but their offense is one of the best in the league. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars, on the other hand, they are scoring 24 points per game, which is the 11th in the league. So it's a little bit behind that 30. However, you combine 30 and 24, you get 54. And the over under on this game is 48. So it just seems logical that maybe you take the over. That is until you consider that the Jacksonville Jaguars are only allowing 21 points per game, 12th best defense in the league. Yards per rush, only 4 yards, and yards per rush allowed, 4 yards. So they are a little bit more shut down than Indianapolis. They're relying on their defense more to get their game going, and then Indianapolis is relying more on the offense. Court pressure on the quarterback, 22% of the time, 14th. So they're not getting a lot of sacks. Turnover differential, though, is +6, sixth in the league. So they're getting a few more interceptions and fumbles off of the other team. A defensive third down conversion rate allowed, they're allowing people to score 40% of the time when they're in the red zone. And remember that Indianapolis is scoring 65% of the time in the red zone. So
Mm.
it'll be interesting to see which one of those wins. Red zone success rate, they themselves are scoring 60% of the time once they're in the red zone. So then this is like a powerhouse matchup. Jess, I think you told me at the beginning of the season that you like the Indianapolis Colts.
I do, and that is a drawback of this because I would love to see the Colts win. Love to see them win. Do you have any strong feelings about either of these teams?
I do not currently.
Okay.
I mean,
Good.
I think the Jaguars are a good team. Haven't seen the Colts play yet. I've just been hearing about them
Yeah.
all season long. I've been hearing how good they are all season long. And they're ranked number one for a good portion of the season. They've lost the last two games. They're on in a bit of a downslide. It'll be interesting to see if they have the fortune to turn it around, which is why we come to you every week to see what the fortune of the stars is.
Absolutely. I'm ready to dive in if you're okay with that. This is very off the cuff today because I just pulled the chart in the past couple of hours, and I do have a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions for you. in particular. So this is the event chart. We have 1 p.m. Jacksonville, Florida. The away team would be the Colts. They are then represented by the Ascendant, and the ruler of the Ascendant which is a retrograde exalted Cancer Jupiter. And then the home team, which would be the Jaguars, is associated with the Descendant and is thus ruled by Mercury in the sign of Scorpio. Now, this is important because Mercury is just now picking up speed. It recently stationed direct, but it's applying to an opposition with Uranus. It's in one of the dark houses in the Placidus house system, at least. And so there are some challenges that the Jaguars seem to be facing. If we look very superficially at the ruler of the Colts, it's an exalted planet, meaning it is better resourced. It's happy to be here. This is a day chart. It is in one of the two houses where the planets tend to be happier. It's the house that Venus rejoices in, but happy to see Jupiter here. There's a close conjunction with a domicile moon as well. Usually the transiting moon reflects what the tempo of that game is, what the focus is of that game. There is a positive aspect with the ascendant for the Colts. All of that seems good, specifically for the Colts. Now, the caveat. The first question that I have for you, Dorje. Saturn is on the ascendant, and Saturn seems to be a stopping factor, and it is in the first house, which would mean there is some type of stop-go motion, slowing down, or less points, perhaps less healthy players on the field for the Colts. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Just astrologically, because I have not been following the Colts, I don't know what their injury situation is, which may very
Sure.
well be part of why they've lost the last two games. I can look it up when you're giving your next presentation, and I'll get back to our
Yeah.
audience with that. My first thought is like looking at this game, you've got Saturn there on the ascendant. That looks really difficult. However, it is receiving a trine aspect from the moon, which is carrying the energy of Jupiter to that Saturn.
Okay.
And that to me is like, well, there's some mitigation going on with the big daddy no or big mama no, because some people theorize that Saturn's a feminine planet, and we got to give them credit. That is a very old tradition coming back from the Greeks. But so then there is this idea that Saturn with its no is being mitigated a bit by the trine to Mercury and to Jupiter.
Mhm.
And so, like, my initial impulse was to look at that and be like, low scoring game.
Yeah.
And now
Yes.
my impulse is to look at it and go like, this is an air game. This is a
Ooh.
crazy air game. You've got Mercury involved, you've got Jupiter
Mhm.
involved, you've got the moon involved, all trining that Saturn. Interception for sure. Lots of air yards for sure. I think that this is not going to be a run heavy game, despite Mars being in the, yeah,
10th house.
look at that.
I
Yeah,
know.
10th house whole sign, but ninth house just right there on the. I mean, what do you do with that?
I know.
Like if
I
you have a
don't know.
planet on the cusp of the MC, are
Yeah.
you saying, well, that's a ninth house planet? It's got some like detriment there. It's not really functioning as well as it could. Or just being cusp of the MC, does that make it function better? Like, what's your experience?
I would say it's probably more functional. I will say, as we know, Mars tends to be the planet that we rely on a lot in football specifically. And for me, in terms of delineating how this shows up, it comes a little bit later when we look at the Colts chart, which is again another layer of nuance. But there's a lot of squares being made between the Colts placements and that Mars. And so I don't know. It feels okay. When I look at this, before I knew rankings or anything, I thought it was an evenly matched game. That is something that I
Mhm.
think feels correct. With regards to the Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter grand trine, what did we have recently? We had Mars as part of that configuration that we saw, and I
Mhm.
thought that would bring in a lot of momentum, but it was lower scoring games. That's what I at least noted, and that may not be a universal truth in terms of, and we can blame the grand trine for that, but Saturn was also retrograde during that window. It's now
Yes,
direct.
it was. Yep.
And so I do think, you know, the greater malefic day chart, the angularity doesn't seem great, in my opinion, for the cult, unfortunately. But hopefully, with this direct motion, there's a little bit more form and function, as you mentioned, with regards to how it's manifesting. And I really appreciate the extra detail that you brought in with Jupiter and the moon forming and applying trine. Well, at least the moon forming and applying trine to Saturn, because that's not something I even would have considered. That's very
Yeah,
valuable.
no, that's super interesting to me. And that moon is past the Mars too. So technically
Mhm.
it's carrying the energy of Jupiter and Mars to that Saturn. One
Hmm.
thing I know is reading different people's charts over the years is if you get a Mars Saturn square in someone's chart,
Hmm.
that person is a highly dynamic individual.
Ooh,
And they
interesting.
are very determined and they want to conquer the world around them. I've seen that enough time, especially if either one of those are on an angle. And
Okay.
here we have, oh, look at that. Like,
I
oh my God.
know. I know.
Yeah. And so, one thing, if I can watch this game, I'm going to, because so many NFL games you watch and they're just kind of like duds in a certain way. It's like
Yeah.
everybody's floundering.
Yeah.
And to me, with that Mars Saturn aspect, squares and the angles, this is going to be a really fun game. There is going to be a huge amount of energy, whoever wins this game has the number one seed in the AFC South. So this is already kind of like a
Big deal.
championship moment between these two teams. I don't think they face each other again in the season. So it's jockeying for, in car racing terminology, it's jockeying for pole position within the division and
Sure.
maybe even pole position within the AFC. We'll have to see if Denver can keep up its charade, pretending they're a good team, which they are doing a really good job of right now. But boy, they look like paper tigers to me when I watch them play.
One question I have for you is how are you looking at this south node in the seventh house, if at all? Obviously, it's very wide from the descendant itself. Is that something that you would consider based on the angularity in the whole sign house system, or not really?
Oh no, I'm not gonna do that far away from the descendant. And part of the reason for that is like, well, that it's hidden. Now it's a hidden factor.
Okay.
So then maybe I'm gonna like, if I'm like just technically analyzing a chart, I'm gonna say,
Sure.
well, there is some kind of like hidden situation involved. Maybe, like if I'm like scrying, I'm gonna be like, well, maybe the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe he has a hidden injury that he's kind of playing
Ooh.
with.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, oh boy. So it's quite possible, that
Okay.
there's an injury.
I
Maybe I'm
shared
remembering last year.
I will say something that was shared 3 days ago. NFL is facing punishment decision following Trevor Lawrence incident. That could be something
Oh, there
separate.
you go. Yeah. No, he did play November 30th against the Titans. Completed 60% of his passes, had 230 air yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He played his balls off, so to speak. So, that does not look like he is playing injured.
Okay, good.
Maybe you're right. Maybe there's some other kind of
Like
like background
background
thing going on
nonsense. Sure.
from the past that the NFL is
Yeah.
investigating. He's probably going to blow that off. I don't think that affects the game at all.
Okay, great. Mercury opposite Uranus, that is within an orb that I would consider. And I'm kind of looking at this in two ways. If Saturn is doing what Saturn has done, which again, contextually, it was retrograde, so it is likely to function differently. Saturn on the ascendant for the Colts, lower scoring for them. That's how I would look at that. Mercury opposite Uranus, that could be an upset. Well, I don't know if it'll technically be an upset unless the Colts are favored, but there's some type of like surprising play going on with
Mhm.
the Jaguars that it might be like, oh, I guess they do have it together compared to the Colts. Or it could be that ongoing sort of losing streak for the Colts, which I definitely don't want to see. I hope they win so bad. But anyway, do you have any thoughts about that opposition? Mercury opposite Uranus.
Yeah, Mercury opposite Uranus. So again, it's kind of hard to tell. Like, do you give Mercury to receivers? Maybe you give it to wide receivers. So there could be some kind of like dynamic play out of the wide receivers. You could see a wide receiver bust out a long touchdown, get a 40, 50, 60 yard reception at that point. Just want to mention that Daniel Jones, who is a quarterback for the Colts, is playing with an injured leg. And
Oh,
so we asked about like, oh, what's going on with there? That would probably be the Saturn on the ascendant. There he has this limiting factor here.
okay.
Does he play up and through it on this very big game? And so like he's playing through some pain there. I don't, you know, but I think he's going to be very accurate. I think that Uranus Mercury is going to be on both teams. It's going to be helping out both teams.
Okay.
Although I can see as a ruler of the seventh, we're looking at it to be more helpful for Jacksonville, probably. But one thing we have to remember is with the ascendant being conjunct Saturn, that also means the descendant is opposed Saturn.
Good point.
And so there's some kind of dynamic play there. And, maybe the Colts defense comes up and is strong. I feel like over the season, my thinking on Jupiter and what it's doing has evolved a little bit. And I remember Bernadette Brady saying, be careful of Jupiter if it's the ruler of a particular team, because what it's going to lead itself to is a team that is not necessarily focused on winning, but they're
Mm.
a little bit kind of like expanded in how they're presenting. And for, that 90 minutes of gladiator gridiron work, you've got to be extremely focused and extremely hard. But at the same time, you have Mars conjunct the midheaven, and the midheaven tends to be the visiting team,
Okay.
whereas the fourth is the home team. So, like, I think the Colts have both the maybe a stronger desire and maybe a stronger will for it, but also with Daniel Jones's leg injury, dealing with a little bit more of a hindrance and obstacle. And to me, it's going to be, can the team step up and stop Trevor Lawrence? I mean, he threw a 111 quarterback rating game last week. That's really good. If he does that again, I think the Jaguars are winning.
Yeah. And so maybe part of this narrative, kind of to build on what you shared, the Colts certainly want it, right? Like maybe the Saturn is the desire and the drive to pursue the goals that they have, and then it's echoed by this Mars, but then Jupiter ruling both the midheaven and the ascendant,
Oh boy, yeah.
they're maybe missing it, or they have a more scattered energy with regards to how they are showing up.
And the moon's leaving Jupiter. It's
Yeah,
leaving Jupiter and it's moving towards Mercury.
yeah, yeah. I feel like my feelings are kind of clouding this a little bit.
Well, you know what? Everybody, like the Colts are predicted to win by 1.5, and you
Okay, so
give
it is close.
three to the visiting team, and so then it's like nobody knows who's going to win. Vegas is like totally non-committal on this game.
Sure.
So we're not the only ones, and I'm seeing
Oh.
nothing decisive in this chart,
Yeah, at all.
which, yeah.
It could be a close
So,
game. When I find charts like this, it's like very close, like a field goal game or like a single
right.
touch situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I feel that the only thing I'm comfortable with is the over.
Okay.
Because the over is 47.5. As we saw, both of these teams together on average are scoring over 54 points a game. And okay, you got Jupiter, Moon, Trine Mercury, Mars on the midheaven, and all of that's, yes, it's trying Saturn, but it's also trying that Neptune, right?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with the over, but I
Okay.
am not comfortable throwing down like on which team's going to win here.
Yeah.
I hope that's okay. I apologize to anybody who's watching this who's like, tell me the team that's going to win.
Well, let's see if the individual charts change your mind at all. So
Oh,
the
perfect.
inner wheel is the Colts, the outer wheel is the game. And the only thing that I saw where it's like, oh, they're having a winning streak, Pluto is passing over their sun. And typically when I see Pluto on angles, on luminaries, it's usually not great. However, if there's a strong Saturnian signature, or not necessarily Saturnian, if there's a strong Pluto-based signature specifically, then it's like, okay, like they can work with this less of a behemoth. I don't really look at Pluto conjunctions as like, yay, happy fun time. However, they've been doing okay, and that's the only major longer term transit that I saw as like particularly activating.
That's
Of
right.
course,
That's brilliant,
Uranus,
just because it is a long-term transit, and they
yes,
are having an incredible season.
yes.
That That's fascinating.
I
I
know.
mean, that's really helpful to anybody who uses astrology for sports gambling. That maybe is something to look ahead at, like say in July when you get to take your bets and say, is this team going to win 10 games or not? Maybe a Pluto aspect strongly placed is something to think about.
My consideration is it is some type of significant sort of overhaul of the existent energy. And so they
Mm,
were not outstanding necessarily. It's like, oh, they're having this incredible run. So perhaps the opposite would be true as well. If a planet, or excuse me, if a team is like particularly strong, particularly dominant, and then they have this hard Pluto aspect, which in this case I would consider it a hard aspect, despite it being a conjunction, it may be turning the tides against them in terms of how they are performing and how they are showing up. But that's just my thought. That is not necessarily something rooted in deep observation.
I'm
So,
totally with you on that. Another observation, not necessarily deep, is that I do think that the sun is the quarterback in an NFL game or on an
mhm.
NFL team. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, what happened to Daniel Jones? He's just been one of these kind of like journeyman quarterbacks that nobody thought anything about. And suddenly he is on a holy terror, scoring 30 points per game, even when injured. So maybe that's also that Pluto aspect there is like it's highlighting the quarterback position, it's highlighting the sun, and he's carrying the team.
Yeah, that's
Fascinating. Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible. I think that that is highly plausible, to be honest with you.
Mm,
Beyond that, I am not seeing too much activation, but what I did see was the
mm.
transit sun is forming a square and applying square with the Colts Mars, and
Yeah.
and so I was like, like again, they might be a little bit on a streak of not doing as good as they
Oh
were.
boy. Yeah.
That's the only informing factor that I saw here. I didn't see anything outstanding. Is there anything else you want to address before I look at the Jaguars chart?
Well, since you mention it, what about that Mercury on the Descendant? Again,
Yeah.
to me, that's an air game. That's like,
Okay.
oh, I am leaning against the Colts at this point. I am
Yeah.
leaning towards like on my own personal, like kind of like Sunday thing, doing $5 on the over in Jaguars here. Because okay, so the descendant is in that Scorpio, like you said, picking up. But I really don't like that Sun square Mars, squaring the
That's
natal Mars
yeah,
from the eighth house.
that's an issue for sure. I just also the Venus square. I know Venus is not a huge indicator in football, but that's a little bit less celebratory in my opinion.
Mhm.
Jupiter, the moon, they're separating from Uranus. So there's not really that much else that's going on. There is a square with Saturn. The moon is applying to a square with the cult Saturn as well. So here again, it just feels like they're under more pressure. It feels like maybe injuries are taking place in this game above and
Mhm.
beyond what would be typical, or
Mhm.
people are injured. That's kind of what I'm taking from this.
Now we did theorize that the Sun might be quarterbacks in
Ooh, yes.
the NFL. And so then what kind of injury? A quarterback injury. Okay,
Yeah,
he's got a legs issue he's struggling with. So
absolutely.
I mean, and I'm assuming even though the Jaguars don't blitz a lot, they're going to draw up a lot of pressure and they're going to really try to get to him,
Yeah,
hurt him because, that's the beauty and the beast of football is like these guys are trying to hurt each other in order to get some kind of advantage.
absolutely. It's unfortunate but true. Very much a gladiator type of moment. Now, the inner wheel here, this is the Jacksonville Jaguars. As you'll notice, this is a 6 a.m. chart. Normally, I do the noon chart. This is because it was relatively recent, and I believe that they were announced with the
Oh
newspaper.
boy.
I know that was a headline. Again, take it with a grain of salt. This is not like set in stone, the correct rising sign. We do see a number of things going on. I do want to note also the South Node conjoining Chiron. That's not specific to this game. That's a longer term transit that is not really right this second, but it is a
Hmm.
story. But what
Hmm.
we do see is Mercury is applying to a conjunction with the Jaguars' Venus. We also see the transiting Venus conjoining the Jaguars' Sun, and we see the transiting Sun conjoining the Jaguars' Mars to the degree.
Oh boy, yeah, I'm really going with the Jaguars
I
now. I'm so sorry.
know.
But I am looking at that and I'm going, okay, South Node, in about 4 or 5 weeks, it's going to be close to 8 degrees Chiron. The Jaguars might be really excited about who they are and what they're doing and what they're becoming, and they might be one and done when they hit the playoffs.
That's what I was thinking. It looks like down the line, not a winning season necessarily. I mean, in terms of Super Bowl level,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that Mercury conjunct the natal Pluto, Sun conjunct the natal Mars. Oh
Mhm.
boy, Venus conjunct the natal sun. Like, okay, yeah, this is like the son's going to be freaked out as I put the mortgage down. Yes.
Absolutely.
No, I
Uh,
would not do that. I don't recommend anybody do that. But this is becoming more and more of a convincing narrative for the Jaguars,
yeah.
and I'm willing to make
Also,
that call.
Well, let's see. It's a little bit, no, it's close. So the transiting moon is forming and
Oh,
applying,
wow.
yeah,
Yep.
trine to Pluto. And then there's a conversation with Mercury, but it's separating. And there's an applying trine with Venus as well. Jupiter is also part of this conversation.
And Saturn from the fourth house, from the home, they are jazzed. They're
Yeah,
psyched. They believe that they're a winning team. I think it's been a
yeah,
few years since Trevor Lawrence has been healthy all season, and
yeah.
they've been able to claim that. And I think they're claiming that
Mhm.
this game. I think they're claiming it. I do have a question for you because when we talk about football as being a game, a gladiator type of sport, one of the things that I think astrology is really informative of is that we have these ideas about what is good, what is ethical, what is clean. And but also then you see well Mars is this archetype of pain and conquering and
Yeah,
punishment, and then football is that. So football embodies that. And one of the things I think I appreciate about football is that it gives, you know, people a place to have that Mars experience without actually hurting other people,
yeah,
except for the players. But they're by the time they're in this level, the NFL level, they're all getting paid very well to put their body on the lines. And
certainly.
oftentimes they're either coming from families that do that generationally, or they're creating generational wealth for the first time
Yes.
for their family. And it's that sacrifice. And I was just wondering, like, what your thoughts are on that. Like, okay, Mars can be hard. It can create trauma,
Mhm.
but it is also a principle that's in the chart and that you see it. Should we deny it? We both work on not harming others and,
Correct.
limiting the harm we do. And I'm sure we both have learned on our way as souls in that way. But then here's just like a rude, true Mars thing. Like you
Yeah,
have Trump, Mars conjunct the Ascendant, right? He is being a really Mars person,
yeah,
and I don't like him for it, but I got to admit that
yeah.
there is Mars in the
Hmm.
universe doing
Yeah,
Mars things. How do you
absolutely.
relate to that?
I think that I'm a natal Mars square Pluto person. My Mars is in
Oh,
its own decadent terms in the sign of Leo. Well, I'm a Libra rising. I have
okay,
all the
okay,
Venusian
yeah.
energy, but I have learned that if I just lead with the Libra, if I just lead with the Taurus, it causes issues internally for me. And so having to reconcile your relationship with Mars is sort of part of the experience of being here, of being a human being, of facing
Hmm.
rage, frustration,
Sure.
conflict. You have to, however, you get to decide what that pathway looks like, and it's going to look different person to person. But there is a need to confront those facets of humanity, at least as far as I'm concerned. What do you think?
No, I really appreciate it. I got Mars conjunct the North Node.
Well, all
And
right.
so I feel like for me, like my whole life is learning exactly what you just said. Because I've got a Libra midheaven, so and it's a strong one, and it's
Yes.
sensitive because the
Yes.
moon's right there. So I'm very empathetic, and so I've shunned that principle my whole life, and it causes, I think, for myself and for others by coming out as like kind of like a passive aggressiveness,
Sure.
perhaps,
Sure.
until I learn how to master and acknowledge that that is an authentic energy that
Yeah.
has to be worked with.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I,
that's an aside into the astrology. What
yeah.
were you going to say?
I think that for me, the take home has been, and this is an ongoing story for me, what language do you want to use in terms of processing and connecting with Mars? Because again, there can be
Hmm.
just that brute force. That's very much Mars. That is the contact point in football. That could also be the downstream consequences like CTE, the repeated injuries, like that is martial in nature.
Hmm.
But what does a healthy connection, or I don't know if healthy is the right word, but what is a sustainable connection with Mars for you? What does that look like for you? And for me, like that has been really directly engaging with the feeling and processing through physical movement. That is like the go-to because the rational mind is not a part of Mars square Pluto. It's not there. But
Hmm.
having that direct conversation is necessary. And for many people in the world, we're seeing more of the base desires, base drives being made manifest with Mars, which can be, I think, really detrimental not only to the individual, but also to the people around them. In the case of Trump, right? That is
Hmm.
negatively impacting hundreds of thousands of people. More than
Millions,
more than
millions.
that, certainly more than that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, no, disassembling USAID, I think they've
Yeah.
said it killed over like 3 million people because just from the PEPFAR and the destruction of the food aid. And the food rotted in warehouses and it was just not distributed because they say we're not doing this anymore. Like
Mhm.
millions of people. But I mean, that's a really kind of like fine point, and I think that's really beautiful. And one of the things I really enjoy about talking to you is like being able to bounce these conversations about astrology forth is one of the benefits of going to an astrologer like Jess is learning how to be conscious of that energy in your chart and
Yeah.
how to work with that in a conscious way. And so we can talk about, well, the football players are embodying that, right? Like different players and they might get CTE, they might die when they're 60, they might die when they're 35, they might die when they're 25, they might when they're 50. They're going to make a few $1 million. They're living this archetype. But
Mhm.
most of us aren't.
Yeah.
And if we don't embody that Mars in a healthy way, it's not going to make us $1 million or 5 million or 30 million per season. It's not going to do anything other than just create a train wreck for us. And so then learning how to be conscious of what these planets are doing in the chart, that I think is one of the real reasons that you go and you talk to an astrologer, not just predicting what kind of events will occur in the future.
Absolutely. And something I appreciate so much working with you is the specific perspectives and nuance and language that you're able to bring to things that, I've been practicing for 7 years. You've been doing this for over 20 years. And I think the perspective you hold, the perspective astrologers in general hold are invaluable because it's not only these years of practice, of reading, of taking classes, of working in sort of consulting spaces. It is also an external person who has a more objective, non-attached way of assessing some of the stories you might be navigating, the relationships you might be currently confronting and working with the planets, within yourself, within the broader world. So anyway, I
Wow,
really appreciate
beautifully, beautiful, beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
it.
Well said. And so it's very interesting and cool to me to like approach football from that perspective as an athletic sport. And we could be like, well, here's how the planets are bouncing off of each other, but then to also notice that the archetypal energies that are involved with that. And to reflect on how that arises within our own lives, because we're all going to be having this transit this Sunday. We're all going to be
Yes.
having Moon conjunct Jupiter,
Yes.
trine Mercury, trine Saturn, and for every single one of us, that's going to be expressing in our lives and in our psyches.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. The last slide that I have is just the triple chart. So this is what we've talked about, but this is now looking at, the inner wheel is the Jaguars, middle wheel is the Colt, and then the outer wheel is the game itself. I never know how to configure this, if we should put the actual game on the inside, but I like to see how the game is impacting the teams. I don't
Mhm.
see anything soup inspired to talk about in terms of the partnered synastry of the Jaguars and the Colts. But I just wanted to share this in case there are any thoughts that you have or want to address.
So, I'm keen into the Colts have their descendant conjunct the Jaguars Venus, and then that Venus is conjunct Mercury. It's being hit by the trine. And so I'm leaning towards, again, the Jaguars winning this game.
Okay, all right.
Based on that. But that's the most noticeable thing. So whenever these two teams play, and it would be fascinating to see like who wins more often or more frequently. The descendant for the Colts from the
Mhm.
chart that we're using is conjunct the Jaguars, Pluto, and Venus.
Mhm.
And so there must be some kind of like theme in this. I don't think they have I could very well be wrong about this, but I don't think they have a savage rivalry, but they
Yeah.
are both in the same division, so they must have some level of right.
Something going on for sure. Yeah, I love when you look at two team charts and you're like, oh, there's a long, bitter rivalry. But there's not a lot of dynamic energy between these two teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think that's because of how far away they are from each other? One's like in Florida, kind of relaxed. They've got a swimming pool in the stadium. And then the other one's like freezing their asses off, like,
Right.
way up north, just
That could
two
be part.
different birds. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Jess. So everybody, if you listen, I think Jess has closed her books for December, but she'll be opening up again in January. You can get a reading from her. My books are open. You can get a reading if you want. If you want to talk sports, just email either one of us or contact us on Blue Sky. What's your handle on Blue Sky, Jess?
I have no idea. Spicy Gemini, maybe?
I
Probably.
see Gemini, maybe. And then I'm Dorje Padma or Heart Astrology on Blue Sky, or you can Jess on Instagram, where she is like magnificent present. And then how do they find you on Instagram?
Spicy Gemini memes. I do my best to post memes a couple of times a month there. And I also just like to banter and talk to pretty much anyone. So I am a Gemini. Say hi if you want.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely great. And then see you guys next week, hopefully. We've been a little spotty recently. We've been busy. Sorry about that. But hopefully we'll see you again soon and have a great Sunday watching football.
Bye.